You should recognize this. I hope so. But if not, just hum along or dance along if you want. God, you are every mountain. God, you are every ocean. God, you are every canyon, every inch of earth and sky. God, you are every morning. God, you are every midnight. God, you are every moment, every second of my life. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. God, you are every sunrise. God, you are every moon glow. God, you are every star shine, every inch of earth and sky. God, you are every springtime. God, you are every snowfall. God, you are every season, every second of my life. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. 'Cause you are the very breath I breathe, and your perfect love created me. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. Our thoughts are prayers, and we are always praying. Our thoughts are prayers. Listen to what you're saying. Seek a higher consciousness, a state of peacefulness, and know that God is always there. And every thought becomes a prayer. Our thoughts are prayers, and we are always praying. Our thoughts are prayers. Be mindful what you're saying. Seek a higher consciousness, a state of peacefulness, and know that God is always there. And every thought becomes a prayer.
If we have any prayer partners with us today, if you could come and stand up here with me and hold space while we do our opening prayer. I invite you to close your eyes, to settle into a prayerful place in your consciousness, in your body, in your heart. As we become keenly aware of how we choose to show up today. Do we choose to show up as the kind of person that we want to see more of in this world? One who smiles, one who cares, one who gives and takes the time to listen. As we pass these questions through our consciousness, we allow ourselves to drop down deep into the pure essence of the divine which fills this space right here and now. And we already know that the answer is yes. I choose this day to have a smile, to be more kind, to care, and take the time to listen. Listening within, listening without, and healing by doing just that. We are grateful for this time together. We are grateful for this opportunity to make a choice each day to show up as exactly the person we want to become. We're grateful that this is so, and we say amen.
Sing that again. Our thoughts are prayers, and we are always praying. Our thoughts are prayers. Listen to what you're saying. Seek a higher consciousness, a state of peacefulness, and know that God is always there. And every thought becomes a prayer. Our thoughts are prayers, and we are always praying. Our thoughts are prayers. Be mindful what you're saying. Seek a higher consciousness, a state of peacefulness, and know that God is always there. And every thought becomes a prayer. Seek a higher consciousness, a state of peacefulness, and know that God is always there. And every thought becomes a prayer.
Okay, well, we're going to get started here. This is where we were all last week. This is Mike, Santisha, Erna, and myself. And for those of you that may not know, Mike on the left there is our church administrator, and then we have Santisha, my co-minister, Erna, our music director, and then myself, who's a nobody. I'm trying to make a name for myself, though. I'm working on it. We were at the Unity People's Convention. Right there, we're actually overlooking the Unity fountains at Unity Village, which is an amazing place to be. And this is a convention that happens once a year in the Kansas City area, which is not too far from Unity Village. And it's for all people. Primarily, you'll see Unity leadership there, but it is open to everyone who wants to attend. And what happens at this convention is 5 days of intense lectures and seminars and business meetings and networking opportunities. And that leads us up to our words of wisdom for today, which were also the theme of the convention itself. One humanity, many stories. If I knew your story, I couldn't help but love you. Let that just settle into your consciousness for just a moment. If I knew your story, I couldn't help but love you. Which is a very powerful point to be made in this day and age of disconnection and distraction. So at the convention were several speakers and workshops on diversity and inclusion to help train us as Unity leaders and lay leaders to help us better understand the various people that will be showing up in our churches, in our congregations, at our workshops, and the different things we do in our groups. to better understand their story, to better understand their background and the various people we serve. And one of those sessions was focused on the LGBTQ community and gave us the opportunity to listen to a gentleman named Michael. And Michael was born female, with female anatomy, if you will, and labeled at birth as a girl, as they do. But even though everyone said Michael was a girl, Michael knew from a very early age that Michael was in fact a boy. We got to hear about his 40-year struggle growing up in a world that couldn't understand a person recognizing themselves and identifying themselves differently than the body that they were born with. We got to have a conversation with Michael about his process and his transition and everything he had gone through in those 40 years. And we got to have that conversation in a very safe and loving environment, which was a very beautiful experience to do that in. And he also shared with us his experience with church and how that played out in his life, and that he's actually still very much a part of church today, and gave us some very good, eye-opening advice on how to be more open and accepting and aware of the various people that we all express as we come into this building, and not make any assumptions about anyone, but to accept everyone as they present themselves. So it was a very powerful experience to go through with Michael, to see that, to hear that, and to look at what are we doing in our own churches that we could improve to make it a more welcoming environment. And hearing his personal story and just being able to talk with him about it was far more impactful than any other presentation could have been through a video or a discussion panel or a talk on stage or anything like that. And I've been through several trainings in my life through the MGM Corporation and through Unity about the LGBTQ community, but nothing really compares to actually having a conversation with somebody and sitting down and hearing their story. We also had a session about how to better reach out and include the Spanish-speaking people in the communities that we serve in our cities. And here they spoke about the cultural differences that we should be aware of that we may not know about, and the technical difficulties that come with trying to implement multiple languages in a single church experience. And that we should not take for granted that what we've presented in an English way before translates necessarily to another culture and how they would want to receive that message. So it really made us ask ourselves and really try to role play into that experience. If I joined a church that did not natively speak my own language, what would need to be there in order for me to feel welcomed and included? And it really makes you start to walk through the process from stepping in the front door to sitting in the pew to going to a group to have an experience. What would I have to experience, not hearing my language as the native language being spoke there, to feel welcome and included? Which brings me to a very timely situation that we are facing today, and I feel that this needs to be addressed. ICE set to begin immigration raids in 10 cities on Sunday. This is from the Washington Post. The Washington Post reported Friday that a roundup of as many 2,000 families facing deportation orders is expected to begin with pre-dawn raids Sunday in Denver and elsewhere. ICE Director Mark Morgan advocated for the operation known as Family Op. This article is talking about this morning. This is happening right now. Pre-dawn raids on families on a Sunday morning. And they even have the lack of connection, the lack of awareness, and the lack of consciousness to call it Operation Family Op. How does that make you feel? And today there was supposed to be an outdoor festival in downtown Boulder. The festival was called Latinx and was hosted by the Boulder Latin Chamber of Commerce. Unity of Boulder, this church was scheduled to have a booth set up at that festival. And now I would like to bring up one of our own congregants to speak on this issue, and this is Stephanie San German, and she's actually one of our translators who sits up there and translates our service for us. So I'm going to run back here and grab you a microphone, if I can find one. All right. All right. So I'd like to just find out, just initially, what was the purpose of the festival that was going to happen today?
Well, as Shad mentioned, the Latino community is really diverse. So we're multicultural, and we're even multilingual. People think of, Spanish, but it incorporates Portuguese and indigenous languages as well. So it's really a time for us to come together to celebrate our cultures, our heritage, and to unite, and also to share that with the greater community. And I think really having it in Central Boulder was symbolic, because I think it's a community that here has felt maybe unseen or invisible. And even actually in talking to Rosa Estrada, who's interpreting today, she had mentioned how excited she was for us to be celebrated in the center of Boulder. So it was really important. It's an important day for us.
And you were actually involved in the festival itself. How are you involved, and what transpired?
Well, I'm a business owner, so I have a business, Crystal Bed Wellness. I support people with its tool and gaining balance, peace of mind, and clarity in their lives. But I am on the chamber, the Latino chamber, so I'm the vice chair of the chamber. We are the fiscal sponsors of the festival. The coordinator of the festival, Jose Beteta, he's the former figurehead, but he's leading the organization of the festival. And so we're a new board, so we've all been supporting with this year's festival.
And so today's festival got postponed. And we texted back and forth, and you said that these raids had something to do with that. And I'm curious how that came about.
Yeah, so we actually had a retreat yesterday with our new board, planning ahead, and then, first of all, the weather was not favorable for this celebration, and then secondly, these raids, and they were scheduled to start today, so there's definitely, I would say there's always fear within this specific demographic of the community, but with something like this, it's definitely elevated. Yesterday in our meeting, one of our chamber members actually left early because he had to meet with 3 different business owners in secret meetings that are confidential to help with their exit plans in case they were deported. I'm like getting really emotional. So, I'm sorry. So, 1 in 10 people in Colorado are immigrants, born out of this country. Out of those, 1 in 3 don't have proper documentation. One of the ways that can happen is people overstay their visas. I actually know someone who just, their paper went to a different address, and so they weren't up to date. So it really can vary in terms of what that looks like. I think there's this stereotype of what an undocumented person looks like. It is a particular demographic. I would say the chamber has this niche of working with the immigrant community, and a lot of the businesses that are in it are very closely tied to this community. So what happened was, this announcement took place a week ago, and there's this fear, and even though about 12 hours before the raids were supposed to begin, the president announced that they would be delayed for 2 weeks while Congress, I think we have a 2-week time frame for Congress to get together on, what was it, the exact wording? Settling an immigration solution, but our event coordinator didn't feel confident that would be honored. So it was just decided, because of the weather and this situation, it wasn't necessarily the best conditions for festivities.
Thank you. And thank you for having the courage to come up here and share that with us. I think all too often we find ourselves isolated from what's really happening in the world because we have what we call the Boulder Bubble. Everyone aware of the Boulder Bubble? 8 square miles surrounded by reality. At least that's what we called it growing up. And I really appreciate you having the courage to come up here and share that with us. And it really hit me hard when we were coming back. That I was planning to talk about stories, and then this is happening. You see, in order to marginalize or to mistreat a group of people, you have to create distance. You have to establish an us versus them mentality. And you have to advertise it, and you have to publicize it, and you have to get a lot of people on board with that concept so you can build this divide of us versus them. And you have to build up a false identity, and you have to create a false story so you can say, there, they are the problem. And we have done that for thousands of years on this planet, and yet we mostly still buy into it. Thousands of genocides perpetrated because one party could build a story about them, they are the problem, and somehow get people on board with that concept. But when you take time to actually listen to their story, you will not be able to avoid the truth that, oh my goodness, they sound a lot like me. One of my very first talks that I gave as a minister in Las Vegas was about this famous passage from the book of Genesis. It said, "Then the Lord said to Cain, 'Where is your brother Abel?' He said, 'I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?'" For those not familiar with this story, Cain and Abel are the first two-born sons to Adam and Eve. And the reason that Abel is missing is because Cain had just slain him. He had killed his brother out of jealousy for the fact that God had shown a little bit more favor to Abel than he had to Cain. And metaphysically, Cain represents the selfishness in us, the body-centric consciousness in us that is concerned with what serves our personal needs. It has no issue slaying Abel because Abel's in the way of achieving the personal wants and desires of our personal needs or the things we think we need. And metaphysically, Abel actually represents the breath of the body or the functioning of the physical body, or what you might call the physical mind, the thing that's keeping it all together. The mind that can rationalize, it can analyze, it can work its way through problems based on simple logic. And you don't need a high spiritual consciousness to realize that instead of attacking each other in this human experience, we are better off when we help and protect each other. Time and time again, we've proven that to be true, but yet for some reason, we still default back to attacking each other. But what happens when Cain kills Abel? What happens when our lowest selfish nature takes over the mind? When it takes over the place of even simple, basic logic? What happens is you have a complete and utter disconnect from even the most basic forms of understanding. In this incredibly limited state of consciousness, this selfishness state of consciousness, you could look at someone who intends to do you no harm whatsoever, and you could attack them based on a false perception or judgment that you made up. Are you following along? God asked Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" And that selfish, immature, underdeveloped, limited way of thinking responded, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" The selfish nature of Cain has distanced itself from any connection, any responsibility, any sense of duty to his brother. But that only represents one side of what can happen and what is happening in the world today. What I really want to tell you about is something absolutely beautiful and far more powerful that revealed itself at the convention this week. It all centers around one amazing person. This is Maggie Cook Garcia, and she makes salsa. Maggie was our final keynote speaker on Friday morning right before we left. And unfortunately, if you've ever been to a 5-week conference, a lot of people bail Thursday night. Not quite everyone makes it to Friday morning. If you have half the people left, that's pretty good. But we were there. And she has one of the most incredible stories you will ever hear. And it is a story that she shared with us. Unfortunately, I don't have time to do this story justice, but I want to give you enough of it to share the conclusion, because that's important. It started with Maggie growing up as an orphan in Mexico. It was a makeshift orphanage, not what we'd actually expect to see here in the United States. It had about 60 or so other children other than her. And in this orphanage, she experienced the absolute worst and lowest that life has to offer in terms of mental and physical abuse. This orphanage would go weeks without feeding the children, so much so that her and some of her brothers and sisters, as she called them, had to learn how to sneak out of the orphanage into the forest and hunt at the ages of 6 to 12 years old for food. So fast forward, we got to skip a lot of amazing stuff, but fast forward, she received a basketball scholarship to come to the United States and study interior design. But upon graduation, she was unable to find any work in that field. And Maggie then became homeless here in the United States and eventually had to return to the forest in order to survive, because that's what she knew. Some more time passes, some more miraculous things happen. And after a series of events, someone actually recognizes her on the street and takes her under their wing, and she goes on to create an award-winning salsa. She makes this salsa. She was making it just for her friends and family members, and one of her friends said, "This is so good, we're going to submit it on your behalf to this competition," and she won. Out of winning that, a person came forward and said, "I'll give you $800 to start your own business." More miracles happen. She gets distribution at Whole Foods and then several other major stores across the United States, peaking with Walmart and Costco and some of the biggest distributors in the world. Eventually, Maggie sells her salsa company to Campbell's Soup for $231 million. But this is the part of the story that really matters. Now, some people operating from the Cain consciousness might have taken this money to go lose themselves in the self, self-serving adventures based on self-gratification. But Maggie is not one of those people. Instead, she decided to go back to Mexico in some of the most dangerous parts of the country to rescue children, to rescue them from cartels and from human trafficking rings. And here's an article that says, Maggie Cook Garcia jumps from a salsa-making success to a life of service. Now, let me be clear. She did not just send her money to Mexico to help them or start a nonprofit where she gathers other people to go to Mexico to help them. She grabbed one friend and drove down to Mexico where she knew the problems were, and she started gathering up children. And now we're getting to what she said that was so profound. So let me set the scene. So there she was in Mexico, sleeping on a concrete floor, an entryway guarding a room that she and her friend had gathered all these children into. The cartels and human traffickers were actively looking for these children that she had taken from them, and they were actively looking for her. And if you're familiar with cartels, they don't do pretty things. For protection, all she had was a handgun, and her partner had a shotgun. Maggie had also I gotta do what girls do. Oh, that does work. That's better. Okay. She'd also had the intuition to know that if she fell asleep during the night, the cartels would come in when she was not on watch and take those children. She heard a dog barking in the town below. She went and grabbed the dog. She tied it to her waist on the end of a long rope, and she let it sit outside. This isn't even my story. I don't know why I'm crying. She let the dog sit outside, knowing that if something came, the dog would bark, it would pull on the rope, it would wake her up, she could do something to protect the children. Now, Maggie told us she is not a person of violence. She's a person steeped in unity truth. She's actually a unity person. She's steeped in unity truth and unity principle. She wasn't even sure that she could use that gun if she had had to. And she admitted that the guns were ultimately pointless because she knew that God was the ultimate protector in that scenario. And let me take a pause in the story to tell you what I find so beautiful is that Maggie did something we often fail to do ourselves, which is Maggie did something. Our fifth of 5 basic unity principles says, Knowledge of these spiritual principles is not enough. We must live them. She could have said, oh my goodness, what a horrible situation down in Mexico. I'll send $1 million down hoping it does something for these kids. But that's not the way she thought. She did something. She didn't just talk about doing something. She actually went and did it, even though at that point in time she was a multimillionaire. And she wound up sleeping on that floor night after night in the same way for as long as it would take to figure out somehow she could get those kids to safety. On that floor, she laid there, she was afraid, and she was hating the people that would harm children in this way. Hating those that could physically and mentally abuse a child like she when she was young, and like those children that were in that room hiding in that moment. And as she stood on the stage at that point in time, she began to cry. She admitted there was a strong part of her that wanted to kill those people. There's a part of her that wanted them to actually see them so she could kill them. And that would be the voice of Cain in her head. And then she said, but who am I to hate them and wish them harm when I don't even know them? I don't even know their story. I don't know what they have suffered through that has turned them into the type of person that they are today. They have a story to tell, and who is actually listening to it? And then she shared with us a new realization and a new mission for her life. And this is how she summed it up. The problem with organizations that rescue children such as I have, she said, is that they are a Band-Aid on a giant wound. Of course, we need to rescue these children, but who is out there to find the perpetrators of such crimes and not attack them or hate them, but to sit with them and listen to their story and love them? If we don't bother to take the time to heal them, then the problem will forever continue. This is from the book of Matthew. This is Jesus telling a parable about a king, and he said, and the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. What is being done to the immigrants and families, possibly this morning or in 2 weeks or whenever it takes place, is being done to the divine. This heinous thing that has been done to these children in Mexico and children around the world is being done to the divine. And what might be more difficult for us to accept or even conceive of is that whatever is done to the perpetrators of these heinous acts is also being done to the divine. Whatever is done even to the least, the lowest, the seemingly undeserving and horrific is still done to the divine. Hatred and punishment don't heal, because only love can heal. Why is that the case? Why is that a universal law that we all know to be true? Is there anyone here that was just shocked to hear that that was true? No. Why is that the case? Because the actual answer to the question, am I my brother's keeper, is no. No, you are not your brother's keeper. The truth is you are your brother. You are your sister. You are they, and they are you. We are one. There is not a pool of children suffering in Mexico. We are all suffering until something is done about it. Our neighbors here in Boulder, Colorado, are concerned about raids. And that realization is what set Maggie on her new mission. And instead of looking from afar, looking across this chasm of judgment and perception and delusion, instead of looking at someone else and saying, you are there, you are different, you are like me, you are bad, you are evil, Instead of doing that, she is living the principles of unity and stepping across that illusionary chasm that all of us have built. She's now going to take time to find that person and say, hello, my brother or sister, how are you? Tell me your story. Because if I knew your story, I couldn't help but love you. And that is a truth as I experience it. I saw a comedian last night. He talked about crying in front of his girlfriend. He said, I realized if I went like this, I could shake the tears back into my tear ducts. Doesn't actually work. So go ahead and just close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Allow that emotional energy to settle. Not that it isn't useful, but that there's always a time for peace. Allow the heart to slow. Allow the blood to calm. Allow the thoughts to settle. Allow the breath to go deep. Just by closing our eyes, it helps us break down this illusion that there's any separation whatsoever. I see no distance. I see no gap. I see no bridge I must cross between you and I. My eyes are closed. And all I can do is feel. And as I breathe and I settle, each breath brings me closer to feeling. Not with the type of emotion that sways us up and down into anger and sadness, but to feel that steady calm that quietly, but in a steadfast manner, flows in and through each of us as us. There's a peace underlying all things in this experience, always ready to be expressed, manifested and experienced. A peace riding on a wave of joy and bliss. That asks that each and every one of us do what we can just to simply reveal more of it. To not just pray with our hands, but to pray with our feet through action. To not just speak with our words, but to speak with our movement and the way we live. To not just look at shining examples, but to step into the life of becoming a shining example. We take this moment to be still and to settle into that truth. how blessed we are to have been given the tools and the resources to do something. And that's all we need to know. And so it is. Amen.
If this life is one act, why do we lay all these traps? We put them right in our path when we just wanna be free. I will not waste my days making up all kinds of ways to worry about all the things that will not happen to me. So I just let go of what I know I don't know. And I know I only do this by living in a moment, living my life easy and breezy, with peace in my mind, got peace in my heart, got peace in my soul. Wherever I'm going, I'm already home, living in the moment. I'm letting myself off the hook for things I've done. I let my past go past, and now I'm having more fun. I'm letting go of the thoughts that do not make me strong. And I believe this way can feel the same for everyone. And if I fall asleep, I know you'll be the one who'll always remind me, living in a moment, living my life easy and breezy, with peace in my mind, got peace in my heart, got peace in my soul. Wherever I'm going, I'm already home. I'm living in the moment.
All through life,
Facing backwards, I had tried more than once to just make sure, and I was denied the truth that I was searching for. I spun around and heard no more. Living in the moment, living my life easy and breezy, with peace in my mind, got peace in my heart, got peace in my soul. Wherever I'm going, I'm already home. I'm living in the moment, I'm living my life
done. I
easy
let
and
my
breezy,
past
with peace in my mind, peace in my heart, got peace in my soul. And breezy, I'm already home. I'm living in the moment, I'm living my life easy and breezy, with peace in my mind. I got peace in my heart, got peace in my soul.